and welcome to the NEXUS Mountain Network podcast. My name is Chad Hawley, and today's special guest is Dr. Amber Selking. I've been wanting to do a show with her for quite some time. She has an impressive resume. Here's just a couple highlights. Check this out. So she has a master's degree and a PhD in sports and performance psychology. She's the founder of the Selking Performance Group, where she really taps into the power of the mindset and leadership. She has had many different clients that she has served and helped, including the Denver Broncos, the LSU football team, and the Notre Dame softball team. She leads, I like this phrase that I saw when I researched you. She leads in the boardrooms and in the locker room. That's very unique. Many people can't say that. And she also has a book called Winning the Mental Game. She has a podcast that she provides a lot of great ideas to help you have a great mind and be productive. So I want to say to Dr. Amber Selking, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chad. Really excited to be with you and to share with your network. You've got an incredible story, an incredible platform, and just really thrilled about all the stuff you're doing in the world. And it's a true honor to join you. So thanks for having me.
So I first met you at a conference. You were on stage, you were magnetic, you were engaging, and everybody said, you got to meet her. You were that person that people said they got to meet. And I'm just so looking forward to asking you a lot of questions, because what you do is so unique in the world outside of the four walls of the church. And I want to tap into that so others can tap into it too. So before we get into some of those questions, would you mind just telling the audience a little bit about you? Who are you?
Yeah. So I was raised in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania, out in the country, raising livestock. My mom and dad were living the American dream of building their own business. And we had some McDonald's franchises. And then I was a soccer player growing up, and my faith was really important to me. So I had this really cool intersection of, agriculture and business and faith and sport. And being from a small town where there's 1,800 people in one stoplight, there's really not much diversity going on in terms of like different types of people. But being raised with those, four industries, for lack of a better word, in my life really exposed me to a lot of different types of people. And I think in that, it really opened my eyes to, man, there are really good people in really different parts of the world trying to do really good things. And I think that laid the foundation for sort of my life's journey, right? I went on to play soccer at Notre Dame and got injured and had an identity crisis, and went to work in corporate for a couple years, and then found the field of sports psychology, which really allowed me to integrate, I think, a lot of those life experiences to have the opportunity to do what I do now, which is I have a consulting company, like you mentioned, Selking Performance Group, where we do some keynotes for different organizations on just how do people deliver their best more consistently. And then I serve head coach Brian Kelly and the LSU Football Tigers as a mental performance and sort of organizational performance coach. And then have had the opportunity to be in-house in a global publicly traded manufacturing company called Lippert, based here where I live in South Bend, Indiana, and serve as an executive for them, spearheading our culture and leadership initiatives in the organization. So it's been a heck of a journey over the years, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to not just talk about the principles of human performance and organizational performance, but also, like I said, to be in-house in two really high profile, kind of powerful, for lack of a better word, entities of, publicly traded global company and SEC college football. So it's been a really fun journey.
So you obviously, in the master's and PhD, at the very end of that, it was sport and performance psychology. It's almost like you could take all three of those. You could say sport, you could say performance, and you could say psychology, and all three of them you could probably elaborate on them. So let's start with the end, because that was the consistent piece there, was psychology. When did you know that you wanted to get into psychology?
I guess it was funny because I always wanted to be a corporate executive. Like, that was my goal. I was raised in a small business and thought that's what I wanted to do. So I went and worked in corporate and just found myself kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, which you are, and when you start off in anything, but also sitting behind a computer screen with an Excel file thinking, I can't wake up when I'm 40 years old doing something that doesn't matter, right? Really, to the world. And so I called my mom and was sharing my 22-year-old frustration with her. And she said, well, just go back to grad school, and she mentioned sports psychology. And so I Googled it. And as I did some research, I realized that, wow, after I got cut from the soccer team, I led Notre Dame Christian athletes and really worked with our student athletes. How do we understand our identity outside of being an athlete, and who are we under the jersey? And I thought that was just my way to ease my ego out of sport, if you will. But when I found sports psych, I realized that, man, everything that I taught and talked about in Notre Dame Christian athletes through the lens of the Bible there's science behind this. And man, if I could learn more about the science of human performance and how people think and how it impacts how they show up and how it helps them, deliver their best consistently when it matters most, I could touch and work with a lot more people than if I just started from a biblical lens, right? And so I went on that journey, and as I got involved, and I realized, I was like, man, everything that we know in brain science is in the Bible. And so that got me even more excited about the field, understanding that there's truth in this and it can transform people, because I believe that we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds. But the question is, how do we do that? Right. And I think that that's where sports psych is just about helping people understand how the brain works, how it impacts how they show up, and then giving them the tools and strategies to train their brain like they train their body.
So that's so great. So here you have taken a verse or a philosophy or a belief, and you've actually applied, sounds like you've applied practical tools to help people do it versus just maybe a confession of a verse or something. So you mentioned the word biblical lens twice in that last segment. And so can you provide an example of how a biblical lens has helped somebody with the idea of sports psychology?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's either one end of the spectrum or the other, right? I think sometimes people, their faith is really important to them and they believe in the Bible, and that's really strong. But science is kind of seen as a bad thing. And so when you can show them that faith and science can coexist, I think it deepens their capacity to articulate why they believe what they believe and sort of substantiates that in a new way. And then the flip side, sometimes people are like opposed to faith because they think it's soft and fluffy and for weak people, and but they're all about the science. And so, when you teach them the science and then you're like, hey, by the way, did you know this in the Bible? They're like, wait, what? And so it's been such a cool intersection of, I think, helping people really substantiate their faith and solidify and bolster and strengthen. When I was with Notre Dame, I was our mental performance coach for Notre Dame for 5 years as well, for the football team. And now down at LSU, we've got a lot of young men whose faith is really important to them. And so when they learn some of the scientific ways to think about their faith and how that applies to how they show up as leaders or how they show up on the field, it's been really cool to watch. Right. And, examples would be, there's a lot of pressure in the game. And so when they start to see that they can really integrate their identity as a Christian and as an athlete, I think sometimes they think, oh, I'm a Christian, I can't be too aggressive, which is funny to think that football players think this way on the field. But then you share some really biblical examples, or how God talks about your excellence will permit you to stand before kings, and how being really good at what you do is a good thing. And that's not something to shy away from. I think it opens their eyes of a new layer of who they can be on the field and off the field.
That's so good. Just a couple of scriptures you just threw out there right now made me think, I could do with excellence. It doesn't have to be pride.
Right.
What is your motivation behind it? Is it unto the Lord? Maybe. But if it is, I'm sure that's going to help. All right. So take us behind the scenes, because you have such a unique, we'll call it a profession or assignment or call on your life. Take us a little bit behind the curtain. One of your current clients is the LSU football team. So how does that work? Do you meet regularly with a handful of players? Is it optional for them? And how do you make progress, or what types of things that you did provide an example of how you help them? Help us understand what you do and how you do it.
Yeah. So, I have a philosophy. I was trained by Dr. Rick McGuire at the University of Missouri, and he was the head track and field coach at Mizzou for 37 years. So he's a coach, but he's also led the sports psychology program there for 27 years and is kind of like a grandfather in the field of sports psych. And his philosophy is that sports psychology best happens to and through the coach, right? Because they could be with me for however long they want, but they're going to be with their coaches a lot more. And so if coaches don't understand the fundamentals of mental performance, it can get unraveled or not be consistent. And so one of the things that's important to me, whether I'm working with a sports team or a business organization, is being connected with the senior most leader, because at the end of the day, the assistant coaches, they're not afraid of me, and they don't have to listen to me, but
Right.
they do have to listen to Coach Kelly. And at Lippert, like,
Yeah.
our ops leaders aren't afraid of me. Well, some of them claim that they are, but but they're not, right? But they are afraid of Jason Lippert or Ryan Smith or JB Schnur. And so, like, you have to have this leader that's courageous enough to say, this is how we're going to operate. These are the things that are important, and here's how we're going to function. And so, to me, that's a really critical element of how we operate. So with LSU football, like, Coach Kelly and I have been together. This is our eighth season together. And, we're incredibly aligned. Like, we've worked together to build the mission and the process and sort of being able to articulate the organizational culture of who we are and how we operate. And then it's my job to come in and train our players and our staff on some of the fundamentals of sports psychology. So you mentioned I have a book called Winning the Mental Game, the playbook for building championship mindsets. That playbook I created in 2013, and we've been installing that with our guys every year that I've been with him. And that's really an off-season install. So, from January when they come back to start training until March when they start spring ball, we meet weekly and go through that playbook and teach them how their brain works, how it impacts how they show up, give them tools and strategies that they can use to manage their mind and their emotions when they're competing. Then they go into spring ball. Then we do some stuff in the summer, just sporadically. Then we go into fall camp, and we'll do 3 team sessions in fall camp. And then on a week-to-week basis, I'm there with them from Thursday through Sunday. And so on the sideline with them. And Coach and I work on just, where's the team at? What's the kind of the messaging around, knowing where we're at as a team and where they're at mentally and emotionally, and how, what we need to communicate in ways to unlock their ability to perform. So it's sort of this combination of leadership and organizational consulting, and then mental performance coaching. And then guys can always reach out to me for one-on-one work. So we do a lot of team sessions that are very like training type, like in the team room with the big board and a PowerPoint and notebooks, and they're taking notes. And then they go from me to our strength coach. And so they go get to apply what they've just learned in sort of a competitive work environment. And then in season, it's really mindset management and week to week, seeing where we're at and where certain guys are at, and how to optimize that as an individual and as individuals and as a team.
That's neat. That's a great overview. And most of this content, is this content that you have developed? Is it just an accumulation of things that you put together?
So our foundational playbook is my content.
Okay.
And then week by week, the content that Coach and I have co-created is like the LSU football now. It's Brian Kelly vision, mission, process. And then, there's times where, we'll pull different video clips. There's a lot of great professional athletes out there today talking about the mental game and how they apply the mental game and the impact it has. So, we'll use a lot of video to supplement, what we're talking about and how it gets applied, to help them really understand, how do we use this? Because it's great to know it, but it doesn't matter if you don't apply it. So
how do you feel because LSU obviously is a top-notch program, and they have NFL players being drafted first round. How does it, tell me what it feels like when you see some of these players that you've helped get drafted in the first round or any round?
Yeah, my husband and I were trying to count the other day. I forget the exact number, but we're like in the 70s of draft picks over the last 8 years. And I think we had worked with 6 of the top 10 draft picks, first round draft picks that went this year, or maybe like the top 12. And so it's rewarding, but it's a testament to, the kind of young men that I've been able to be around and the coaching staffs that I've been able to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And it's really special, and to get, I think the most rewarding part is to know what their dreams are and how hard these kids have worked and how much sacrifice or pain that they've experienced along the way, to see their smiles and see them hug their moms and put that hat on, and see those little smiles in there. It's like, they're still little boys, they're men, they're grown men, and they are depth, but like we, to know what their little boy dreams are. I mean, we talk all the time, like, imagine when you were 6 years old, if you knelt down to your little 6-year-old self and say, hey buddy, guess what? One day you're going to play football for LSU. What do you think he'd say? And they'd be like, oh, man, like he wouldn't even believe it. And it's like, don't forget that feeling. Like, that's how you have to walk into this building every single day of like, you play football for LSU and this is a gift and you will not get to do it for very long. So soak up every day. And those days when you're sore and you're tired and you think you want to complain, think about how cool, how far off you thought that was just a couple years ago, and never lose the magic of that because it's over like this. And so, we try to connect that. So when I see them live in their dream, like though that's the image I get is their little self, like being so proud of the choices they've made and the sacrifices they've made to be where they are. And it's special.
So you're a vice president in a global organization, and you have a unique role that I really don't see. I don't know if it's common for corporations to have a role that you have. Is it common? Did just something that you presented, say, hey, I can do this role and this is the return on investment? Like, how did that all happen for you?
Yeah, I'm seeing more of like, chief people and culture officers, which is great. In our organization, it's unique because culture and leadership is separate from our HR team. Okay. And so we function independently, albeit, as you can imagine, we both work in the people space and the culture space. So there's a lot of intersection and a lot of partnership. But that was really set by our CEO, right? Who's like, our HR team has so much to focus on and worry about. And if they're also doing people and culture, that's the easiest thing to not get done, right? Because people have to get paid. You have to deal with like benefits claims. You have to deal with unemployment, like all the different like legal aspects and parts, fundamental elements. And so he's really adamant in having us separate and really focusing on people and leader development. And so how that came to be is I had him on my podcast. I was doing a season on leadership in South Bend, and Jason is a well-known CEO in our area. And so I had him on my podcast and we had a great conversation, and he's, notorious for like being on his phone and like sending a gazillion emails at a time. He's the most responsive person I know. He's impressive. And he was like, would you ever entertain, joining our company and helping spearhead our culture initiative? And I was like, oh, thanks so much. Like, no, I left corporate America once. I'm good. And he's very persistent and a hell of a salesman. And so I was like, I don't do well inside of a lot of structure. And he's like, great. We don't have a lot of structure. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm the easiest. Like, I don't want to be micromanaged. Like, I don't do well coming to an office like every day from this time to this time. He's like, great. You don't even have to have an office. And we have 100 locations all over the globe. So you could be in any of them at any day. And I was like, I need more rebuttals, Yeah. I kept trying to and he was like, listen, I believe we can change the world. You believe we can change the world. We could do this together and it could be really awesome. Like, let's figure out how to make this work. And I had just never been around somebody that, one, believed we can change the world, and two, is willing to do what it takes to change the world and like be different and be courageous and pay for it. That's the other thing. Like, we now have a team of we've ebbed and flowed over the years, but like on average around 20 people that are just doing philanthropy work. We have 2 chaplains on staff. We have, multiple leadership coaches, personal development coaches that are there for our people. And like, he puts his money where his mouth is. And so it's just been the other aspect of that is I wanted to not just talk about these things that I know are really good and important, but I really wanted to test this stuff out. Like, can it actually work? And so the fact that we've been able to get embedded in a manufacturing company and in college football to be able to say like, hey, this works. My husband and I have a vision statement for our marriage and a mission statement and the core values and standards of behavior, all the things. But like, our vision statement is that we want our marriage to be like Mount Zion, where when people look at us, they can say like, whoa, that's what marriage can be. Like, I want a little bit of that action, because marriage today has like such almost like a negative connotation, or, people speak poorly about their spouses and it just drives us crazy. So like, that's our vision statement. And then I started thinking like, man, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to build Mount Zions where like you can look and say like, yeah, no, you can do this, because you talk a lot about culture and people will be like, oh, well, you're a tech company, so you can do stuff like that. And I'm like, nope, easy. We're manufacturing and we're doing it in a manufacturing environment. Yeah, like, you not just on the C-suite, on the front lines, or it's like, oh, you're private, so you can get away with that stuff. Yeah. Nope, we're public. Oh, you're regional. No, we're global. Like, we're figuring out how to do community service in like North Africa, in European countries where you have to literally get permission to clean up a park from the government, because that's why they pay 50% taxes. So it's like Lippert is a Mount Zion to say, like, there's no excuse. You can do this if you're intentional, if you're courageous, if you have the right people around that are willing to get on this journey and get excited and fight and be passionate about winning, and everything that you do. And then the same is true with football. Like, who talks about positive coaching in a football environment? Brian Kelly, right? Like, we talk about being demanding and not demeaning. You can get on a person and not shred their soul. And when you win or when you lose, how do you weave stability into an organization that's inherently volatile? Like, these things can happen if you have leaders that believe it and are willing to take action around it.
I like that little phrase, demanding but not demeaning.
That's a Dr. McGuire phrase. Isn't that good?
That's a leadership tip right there.
Totally.
Like, I like that. And I think people respond to it, and they see they're valued, they're respected, they're honored, but you're going to be held accountable. And because of that, we'll get results. I love that. So one of our core messages, we have two core messages in what we do. We have purpose will save your life. But then secondly is have the courage to do it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people don't know, what their purpose is for their life. We help them find it and give them action to do it. But the problem is there's one of the most common barriers. And we do the activities where we break the boards and we do all the kind of fun stuff and things to help people overcome. But it's fear. Mm. And fear it could be a variety of things: fear of failure, fear of man, who knows what else, fear of whatever. So when you come across and you're trying to help someone, you get them to that point and they won't take that step because they're afraid. They may not even know they're afraid. Sometimes they don't even know that's fear that's holding them back. How do you help people just push through that fear? I know that's a loaded question, but just high level. Like,
I mean, at the end of the day, like, what are you afraid of? To your point, what are the million things that could be driving that fear? And then, my belief is that it all comes back to a mindset in some capacity, right? And a mindset is not just this buzzword that's on social media. Like, a mindset is a protein pattern that gets wired into your brain based on what you think about, right? And so I tell people that thoughts are like a bicep curl for your brain. Every time you repeat a certain thought, it's a flex in your brain. And as you repeat thoughts over and over, they start to build these protein patterns that change the form and function of your brain, aka a mindset. And another analogy would be mindsets are like Instagram filters, right? Like, they get slapped on your brain and it changes how you view the world or how you view situations. And so if we can help people understand, like, what they're afraid of, but then also where that fear has stemmed from and what it's attached to, and then talk about it and understand why it's false or why it's flawed or why it's maybe incomplete, then we can actually start to rewire your brain. And so what happens when you stop lifting weights? Yeah. Your muscles get smaller, right? Yeah. And so what we do is try to identify some of those mindsets, those limiting mindsets that people might have. And then most importantly, okay, well, what do we want to think instead, right? Like, how are we going to change that negative, unproductive, unhelpful thought pattern into something that's positive or productive or aligned with actually who you want to become or what you're trying to accomplish? And, that's one avenue that we can take with people when really trying to dissect this fear thing.
Okay. So you've worked with so many different people. I actually wrote this down because we're going to re-air the show too, about how many people have gone through the draft and all this kind of stuff. But is there a particular success story? I'm not asking you to disclose the person or their name or anything, but a success story that you just go, man, that was rewarding and just makes you proud.
Yeah, there's been so many over the years, but the best is like when you'll get a text from guys that have been like, Doc, I saw this thing today and it made me think of you and all the stuff you taught us. And so, I had one young man, he actually lost his mom tragically when we were in summer together, summer training. And he was a hard kid, and carried himself hard and tough and, wasn't super engaged. And then, coach made a statement. There was some stuff going on campus that guys were repeatedly a part of. And he said, the next person that does X, you're off the team. And so, he's going through a lot and wants to test the boundaries and does X and he gets the boot and he got suspended coach pulled it back to 2 weeks and he reached out and he said, can we meet? And so we met every day for the 2 weeks. He wasn't even allowed in the building. So we met in a different place on campus and we made a vision board for who he wanted to be and what he wanted to accomplish. And we clarified his goals and why he was here. And, we talked through his losing his mama and how he was going to live his life to honor her and what that was going to look like. And then he came back and it wasn't perfect. And there were volatile moments, but we were able to intersect each other in those volatile moments and reset and recalibrate. And, now he's doing awesome. He's in business and he reached out, he graduated a couple years later, reached out for a recommendation for grad school. Then he reached out for a recommendation for his job and, to be able to be connected with those kids and these very volatile, like your college years are volatile seasons, regardless of like how good of decisions or how bad of decisions you're making. It's just a volatile season of life. You're trying to figure it out and get through it. And to be with these guys in those moments is really, really special. So, that's one of them that I hold dear in my heart. And, cool. but there's been a lot,
So I noticed when I was doing some research on you that you went to, is it South Africa to help build productive mindsets in young people?
Yeah. So I didn't go to South Africa. Actually, a South African pastor found my podcast and they were trying to get into some boys' schools to do ministry work, but they couldn't get in because of separation of church and state. And so we found my podcast and realized and this was season 1 of my podcast. So I wasn't like, hey, here's what it says in brain science and here's what it says in the Bible. But like, if you know the Bible well enough, you can read and listen to brain science and be like, holy smokes, that's in the Bible, And so he made that connection pretty clearly and was like, can we use this and take it into these boys' schools? And I was like, heck yes, that would be awesome. So they used the podcast and the content and took it and taught it in boys' schools and like after school programs. And, as a result of it, got boys to then go to their youth group where they did like an actual series around scripture and the power of the mind. And so it was pretty awesome. And he would send me videos of these little South African boys, learning how to speak and be confident and feel good about themselves. And because they've realized like, man, there's a lot of stuff that's out of my control. But the number one thing that drives my ability to show up and be successful every day is in my control because it's how we think. And I get to choose those thoughts. And so it was really fun to just see them come alive in new ways, when they could tap into the power of how they've been created.
Just in the few minutes that I've spoken to you, I can't imagine people are going to watch this, but I'm already like, I want to exercise my mind better. Like I want to think better. It can be done. And I'm feeling motivated just by talking to you. And I think I wrote something down that I think you said this. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Is mindset means to set your mind. Is that something?
Yeah.
Isn't that a line that you say? Yeah. I remember picking that up at the conference and I was like, yeah, that's it. And so I would imagine there's a lot of people that are struggling with their mind right now, big time. So how can they either follow you or get more information from you to actually say, I'm going to dedicate a new way of thinking. I'm going to renew my mind. You said that earlier when you quoted scripture, and this is a path for you to do that. How do they do that?
Yeah, you can check out our website, selkingperformance.com. And, we have you can find the book, the podcast, articles, all the stuff is there. You can follow me on social media at Champ Mindsets. But I'll just say, even if you don't have time to circle back and, read or listen to anything else, just to some pragmatic, tangible stuff for us here. I think people think that thoughts are just these ephemeral things that float around in the air and don't matter. But the reality of it is thoughts are real things. And they're actually electromagnetic signals that get sent from our brain through our neurons into our bodies and impact how we show up. And what we know is that our thoughts affect our emotions. Our emotions affect our physiological response. Physio just means body. So things like your heart rate, your muscle tension, your visual field, your hormones change on this process. And ultimately how our bodies are determine our performance or how we show up in the moment. And so humans have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And most people are very unaware of the thoughts that are running through their head. And so if you've got negative, unproductive, anxious, angry thoughts, going through your head, that impacts your emotions, that impacts your heart rate, your muscle tension, the cortisol in your body, which is your stress hormone. And so, no wonder people are walking around stressed and frustrated and feeling defeated and, all these mental illnesses going on in the world. Like, we have to get upstream and start thinking differently. So I had one of my guys come up to me after one of our first sessions one year, and he he draped his arm around me, looked down because I'm much smaller than these guys. And he's like, "Doc, I've never thought so much about what I've been thinking about,"
Yeah.
And so I love that. Like, we need to start thinking about what we're thinking about. And if we are become aware that we're having a negative or an unproductive thought, we need to release that thought. But most importantly, we need to replace it. Like, I can't tell you the number of people that I've met with that they're like, "I've been in counseling for 4 years, and like, I'm like, "Great. Okay. That's wonderful. Like, counseling's great." And so we talk about thoughts, and they're like, "Yeah, it's like, acknowledge the thought, be aware of it." And I'm like, "Okay, well then what do you do with it?" And they're like, "We release it." I'm like, "Well, how does that work for you?" Because the last time I tried to not think about something, guess what I was thinking about? The very thing. So you actually have to replace it with right ways of thinking. Like, what is true? Like, fix your mind on things that are noble, excellent, praiseworthy, right? Like, thoughts, emotions, physiological response, and the peace will be with you. Like, that's how this thing works. And so I would just say to people, like, if you want to start on the mental training journey, start to become aware of the thoughts that are running through your head. And then once you become aware, take those thoughts captive and ask yourself, is this thought helping me or is this hurting me? And if it's hurting me, release it and then replace it with something that is right and true about who you are or what you're doing in this world. And little by little, you can start to literally shift how your body works, how your brain works, et cetera.
That's so good because you were giving practical examples without even quoting the scripture, even though you're quoting scripture. And so I might recognize it, but to a person who might be offended if you quoted scripture, but if you quoted scripture and they're like, "Oh man, that's great. That helps me," and they don't know it. Like, I remember when I worked for this pharma company once, and there was CEO of the company. He would stand on stage and he would say things. I'm like, "Wait a minute. He's quoting scripture, like, I see you."
Yeah.
And so this topic really fascinates me. You do a great job explaining it. I don't know if I ever told you, but I used to be the national sales trainer for the second largest pharma company in the world. And then I was also in neuroscience for 10 years. And
I didn't know the neuroscience piece. Cool.
Yeah. So I studied a lot of that. And I would talk to the most prestigious psychiatrists in the world, and I would have conversations regarding the mind. And so this is very fascinating. It's real people. Dr. Selking is a great example of how you can take some ways and practically change your life through the way you think and through your mind. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close this out?
No, just thank you for the work that you're doing, Chad. Our world's in a really interesting place right now, and we need men and women who are courageous enough to stand in the gaps of a lot of very divisive conversations that are being had around our world. And so I'm excited to know you and excited to stand in some of those gaps with you, and just grateful for what you do. So thank you.
Yep. And thank you so much for coming on the show. People, check her out, check out her book, check out her podcast. I learned a lot just in this little bit of information. I'm sure you did too. And you can follow her. And I highly recommend get that book because it's her original content too. And she's helping. I mean, if she's helping NFL players and she's helping major SEC football players, there's something valuable in there for you too. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Chad. Appreciate it.